Hello everyone. Welcome to Deku Universe. Today we are beginning part 2 of What If Deku Became a Girl. The fanfiction is created by aywashe on archiveofourown.org. Now let's begin. The third day of training had begun under a scorching sky. Sweat already clung to the backs of Class 1's uniforms as they pushed through another grueling set of drills. The afternoon sun filtered harshly through the trees as Class 1A and 1B gathered at the training clearing. Sweat already clung to their uniforms from the earlier drills, but this next round was clearly meant to push them further. A sudden burst of energy broke the lull. "All right kids, listen up." Mandalay's voice carried across the clearing as the full Wild Pussycats team stepped forward. Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, and Tiger. The students quieted, turning to face the pro heroes with a mix of awe and nervous energy. "We'll be overseeing today's training," Pixie Bob announced with a wave, nearly bouncing on her heels. "Our quirks let us affect large-scale environments, so get ready for some real terrain-based workouts." Tiger stepped forward next, his massive frame casting a long shadow. "Anyone with strength-enhancing or power-augmenting quirks, come to me." Izuku was already mid-stretch, trying to keep her muscles warm, when Tiger's sharp gaze found him. "You green hair. You look like someone who needs to be pushed." "Why yes sir." Izuku straightened instinctively, nerves prickling across her skin. "Come at me with whatever you've got." Izuku blinked. Attack you. You heard me. Don't hold back." Izuku hesitated only a second before activating full cowl at 5%, green lightning sparking across her limbs. She dashed forward with a swift Detroit smash punch, but in the blink of an eye, Tiger spun to the side, narrowly dodging the blow. Before Izuku could react, a fist slammed into her side, knocking her off balance and sprawling to the ground. "Your muscle fibers haven't torn," Tiger said coolly, looming above him. "You're still not pushing hard enough." Midoriya winced, clutching his ribs but nodding. I understand." Aizawa stepped in beside Vlad King and nodded toward Class 1B. "The Pussycats' quirks cover wide areas. Their method lets them train dozens of students efficiently, especially with environmental manipulation and close combat pressure." Tiger crouched next to Midoriya. "You've got power, kid. But power without control, or DSPLN, is useless. Stretch more. Condition more. The body comes first." Something clicked in Midoriya's mind. The raw burn in her limbs. The failure of his 5%. The feeling that One for All still held back more than she could touch. "It's up to me now," she muttered to herself. She got back up and started stretching again, this time with vigor. Pain throbbed in her side, but Tiger only nodded approvingly. "That's more like it." Midoriya exhaled, wiping her brow as she caught her breath. Her muscles ached, but her control with One for All had steadily improved. The unfamiliar balance of her new body still gave her trouble, but less so than yesterday. She was adapting. "You're stabilizing more now. I see the improvement," Todoroki said as he walked beside her, arms crossed, eyes calm. Midoriya jumped slightly. Todoroki. "Why yeah, I think I'm getting used to it." His gaze lingered on her a moment longer than necessary. "You're more focused today. That's good." Midoriya felt a small, involuntary flutter in her chest. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust her gloves. "Thanks. I'm trying my best." Todoroki seemed to want to say something else, but he stopped when a loud scoff echoed from nearby. "This is. What's with the weird staring contest?" Bakugo barked as he stomped past, scowling. "We're supposed to be training, not making googly eyes." Midoriya froze. "We're not." Todoroki turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "I was giving feedback." "Whatever." Bakugo shoved his hands in his pockets and walked off, glaring over his shoulder. "Keep your flirting off the DMN field." Midoriya stood rooted in place, her face completely red. Flirting. He wasn't, oh my god." "Ignore him," Todoroki said flatly. "He yells at everything." But even as he spoke, his gaze softened just a touch. He added, "Still, if you'd prefer to train without the extra attention, I can back off." Midoriya shook her head immediately. "And no, it's okay. Really. You're helping me." A quiet smile flickered across Todoroki's face, barely there but real. "All right then," he said. "Let's get back to it." "What the hell was that?" Bakugo slammed his palm into a training dummy, the explosion cracking through the humid afternoon like thunder. The head of the dummy launched clean off and landed somewhere near the treeline. Vlad King raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. He knew better than to try and calm Bakugo when he was in a mood. And right now, Bakugo was in a mood. He'd seen it, Todoroki standing too close to Deku. The way she had fumbled with her gloves and looked away like her brain had short-circuited. The way that half and half BSTRD had smiled, barely, but Bakugo saw it. Todoroki never smiled. Bakugo clenched his fists, popping sparks in his palms. He didn't care what Deku did, right? It was none of his business. If she wanted to stumble around all flustered like an idiot, that was her problem. But still, that look on her face when Todoroki spoke to her. It wasn't like how she used to look at him, wide-eyed, cautious, like she was bracing for impact. It was different now. Softer. Open. Too open. Bakugo growled under his breath. Oi, Bakugo. Kirishima jogged over, panting. Dude, you're blowing up the equipment again. Chill out, man. Shut it, hair for brains? Bakugo barked, barely sparing him a glance. I'm training. Kirishima blinked, then gave a sideways glance toward the field where Midoriya and Todoroki were sparring again. Her movements sharper now, more controlled. She laughed at something Todoroki said. Bakugo's eye twitched. Oh, Kirishima muttered, catching on a little too fast. You're watching that, huh? Are you? Finish that sentence and I blow your face off. Kirishima raised his hands. Okay. Just saying, man. No need to nuke me. Bakugo didn't answer. He turned his back, fists sparking, jaw tight. Something about this was off. Not just the weird Quirk accident or Deku's new look or how everyone was suddenly acting like she was made of glass. It was Todoroki. The way he looked at her. Like he saw something there, something Bakugo couldn't quite place. And for some reason that pissed him off more than he wanted to admit. It didn't make sense. No, scratch that. It made too much sense and that was the problem. Deku was still Deku. Same nerd. Same muttering mess. Same reckless dumbass trying to play hero. But ever since that stupid Quirk accident turned her into a girl, something had shifted, and Bakugo hated how much he noticed it. Her voice was softer now. Her movements are different. She laughed more, or maybe he was just noticing it for the first time. Her face still scrunched up the same way when she overthought things, but now her cheeks turned red easier, her hands lingered too long at the hem of her shirt, tugging awkwardly like she wasn't sure how much skin to show. It was distracting. Frustrating. Worse, people were looking at her differently. Especially Todoroki. Bakugo kicked a loose rock across the dirt path. It clattered against a tree trunk and cracked in half. That icy BSTRD had been watching her. Not in the way you watch an opponent or a friend. No, he was paying attention to things Bakugo never bothered with. The way Deku's hair curled when damp. How she bit her lip when she was thinking. That dumb look in Todoroki's eyes, like he wanted to understand her. It's only been days since they were aware of Deku's transformation, and yet that half and half is acting like he's already planning their goddamn wedding. And Deku. She didn't even notice. Or maybe she did. Maybe she liked it. Bakugo grit his teeth, the inside of his glove creaking as his hand clenched into a fist. It made his skin crawl. The soft way Todoroki spoke to her now, voice low and careful, like Deku might break if he said the wrong thing. Like she wasn't still Deku. Like she hadn't still thrown herself headfirst into training, into saving others, into being a hero, even with a body she didn't recognize in the mirror. Bakugo hated it. Hated how things felt like they were shifting. Hated how Deku looked at Todoroki like he was the safe place now. Hated how part of him wondered what kind of look he gave her these days. Shitty extras, he snapped, kicking a loose rock down the hill. What did it mean that he cared this much? Deku turning into a girl shouldn't have changed anything. Quirks go haywire sometimes. It'd wear off. Probably. Eventually. But somehow it had changed things, and not just for her. Bakugo had spent most of his life trying to stay 3 steps ahead of her. Now she was out here tripping over her new body and still managing to pull Todoroki's focus without even trying. It pissed him off. It confused him. And worst of all, it made something curl in his chest he couldn't name. Damn nerd. Midoriya crouched near the training dummy, notebook in hand, scribbling quickly as sweat beaded on her temple. Full cowl sparked at her limbs, but the numbers weren't what she wanted. She sensed him before he spoke, fiery presence, crackling heat in the air. This is still wasting time with your nerd CRP. Bakugo's voice cut in from behind. Midoriya flinched. Kaken. I'm analyzing movement patterns, not. I don't care, Bakugo growled, stepping closer. His red eyes darted down to her open notes. You don't need to write every DMN thing you do. You just need to get stronger. Midoriya stood quickly, heart hammering. That's what I'm trying to do. This is part of how I learn. Bakugo's gaze flicked up. He studied her, longer than usual. Not with softness, but something uncertain, guarded. His scowl deepened. Still talking like the same Demon Deku, he muttered. Even if you don't look like him anymore. Midoriya's grip on her notebook tightened. I am still me, Kaken. He scoffed, but something in his jaw twitched. Then stop acting like you've got something to prove. You were always behind me. Now you think turning into a girl changes that? Midoriya's face flushed with frustration. That's not what this is about. This body's different, okay. I'm trying to keep up. You better, Bakugo snapped, already turning away. Because I'm not slowing down for anyone. Midoriya opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because, despite the harsh tone, the challenge in Bakugo's voice wasn't meant to belittle her. It was a demand. A dare. A reminder that he still saw her as his rival. Even now. Right, she said quieter this time. I'll catch up. You'll see. Bakugo didn't answer. But from across the field, as he started up his next training drill, he glanced back once. Just once. Bakugo stood off now to the side, arms crossed, his sharp eyes fixed on the training ground where Midoriya, she now, was pushing herself like a demon lunatic again. Stupid nerd, he muttered under his breath, watching as Midoriya flung herself into another Detroit smash, barely holding back a wince when she landed wrong and stumbled. Tiger barked out another correction. Midoriya nodded eagerly, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, eyes blazing like she had something to prove. Is it? Of course she did. Bakugo clicked his tongue. He wasn't stupid. He'd seen how Todoroki looked at her during training. Thought he was being subtle. Thought no one noticed. Well, Bakugo noticed. He scowled, gaze narrowing as Midoriya picked herself up again and went right back into stance, mumbling to herself like she always did. Except now it sounded a little softer. Higher. He hated how different she sounded. No, he hated that he noticed how different she sounded. She was still Deku. Same muttering, same DMN need to go plus ultra every second of the day, same ridiculous habit of nearly breaking her own limbs. But something had shifted, and not just on the outside. Bakugo hated that it got under his skin. That it made him notice how the others looked at her now. How Uraraka and Yaoyorozu kept whispering behind their hands. How Kaminari had flushed tomato red when she smiled at him earlier. How Todoroki had lingered. He clenched his fists, the heat in his palms simmering low, restrained. No explosions yet. Not now. Not when she was still going full force like some idiot trying to prove she hadn't changed. Like everyone wasn't already looking at her differently. Bakugo grit his teeth. She didn't have to push herself like that. She already had everyone's attention. Except maybe his. And he didn't know what pissed him off more, that she had it or that he kept noticing why. The sun dipped behind the mountains, bathing the forest in dusk's blue-gray glow. Shadows stretched long across the clearing as Class 1A and 1B gathered in front of the training lodge, full from dinner but buzzing with nervous excitement. Tonight, Mandalay announced with a grin, you'll be tested not with combat, but with courage. A few students groaned, others cheered. Kaminari already had goosebumps. Each pair will enter the forest trail, Pixie Bob added, bouncing with energy, where your fellow students from Class 1B have created fearsome surprises. Your goal. Make it through without screaming like toddlers. Monoma, of course, stepped forward with a smug grin. Naturally, Class 1B's setups will be far superior. Try not to wet yourselves, would-be heroes. Bakugo rolled his eyes so hard it hurt. PSS off. Names were drawn at random for pairing. Midoriya stood near the back, fiddling with the hem of her jacket, cheeks still pink from the day's training. When Mandalay called her name, she jumped slightly. You'll be paired with Todoroki Shoto. She stiffened. Oh, okay. Bakugo's mouth curled into a sneer. Of course it was icy hot. Todoroki stepped up beside her without hesitation, nodding once. Let's do our best. Midoriya smiled awkwardly. All right. Bakugo scowled. She looked nervous, or maybe flustered. Her hand brushed her hair behind her ear, a move that somehow made him grit his teeth. Across the clearing, Uraraka gave Midoriya a thumbs up, mouthing something Bakugo didn't catch. Midoriya turned redder. Tisich. He didn't speak up, didn't complain about the draw. What was he going to say, anyway? That he didn't like the way Todoroki's eyes lingered on her. That she smiled more lately when she was around him. No, that'd be stupid. So instead, he shoved his hands in his pockets, muttering to himself as the pairs were sent out one by one. When Midoriya and Todoroki's turn came, Bakugo didn't look directly at them, but he saw it anyway. The way she tensed, then relaxed a little when Todoroki glanced sideways at her. The way he leaned down just a little to speak quietly, and how she laughed, a nervous but genuine sound. They disappeared into the forest path, shadows swallowing them whole. Bakugo clicked his tongue again, a slow burn rising in his chest. "Stupid Deku," he muttered. "Better not trip over your own feet." The forest was thick with mist and low-hanging branches, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the canopy above. Crunching leaves underfoot and distant hoots from hidden speakers created an eerie ambience that settled over them like a blanket. Midoriya walked slightly ahead, eyes flicking side to side, notebook safely stashed for once. Her hands were curled nervously in front of her, full cowl sparking faintly at her ankles for balance. "This is kind of spooky," she murmured, trying to keep her voice steady. Todoroki, a few paces behind, responded in his usual even tone. "They've put more effort into this than I expected." Midoriya glanced over her shoulder. You're not scared at all." "I've faced villains who could kill me with a thought," he replied dryly. "Fake BLD and fog machines don't really register." Midoriya huffed a soft laugh. "Right. Good point." They walked a bit further in silence, the path winding deeper into the forest. A sudden loud bang echoed to their left, followed by flickering red lights from between the trees. Midoriya yelped and jumped slightly, instinctively stepping closer to Todoroki. He caught her arm without hesitation. "It's fake," he said calmly, gaze focused ahead. "I know. Just reflex." He didn't let go immediately. His fingers stayed firm on her forearm, grounding. "Protective. You've been pushing yourself hard lately," he said after a moment, eyes forward. "Even more than usual." Midoriya blinked at him. I'm trying to make up for lost time. And this new body's thrown off my center of gravity, muscle memory. I have to adjust." "I've noticed." He finally let go, but his eyes met hers. "You're doing well." A faint blush touched her cheeks. "Thanks, that means a lot." They rounded a bend, and a bloody mannequin dropped from a tree in front of them, shrieking with a pre-recorded villain laugh. Midoriya jumped behind Todoroki this time, hand flying to his shoulder. "Okay, that one got me." Todoroki tilted his head. "Understandable. That one was kind of annoying." She couldn't help it, she laughed again. "A real one this time." It echoed lightly through the trees. He looked over at her, just briefly, and she caught the subtle change in his expression, not a smile, but a softness. Like he was letting his guard down for a moment. "I like when you laugh," he said simply. Midoriya froze. What? "I'm just being honest." His tone remained neutral, but he looked at her longer this time. "You've been tense all day." She stared at him, heart skipping a beat. "I guess I didn't realize how tense until just now," she whispered, suddenly feeling warm despite the cool forest air. Todoroki turned forward again, walking ahead a few paces. "We should finish the course. They'll think we got lost." Midoriya followed, cheeks warm, fingers twitching at her sides. She didn't know what that had been. A compliment, a casual comment, or something more. But she couldn't deny it anymore. She liked being around him. She liked the way he noticed things. She liked that he noticed her. And maybe Uraraka had been right. Maybe Todoroki was looking at her differently. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't mind that one bit. They were nearly through the path now, winding past the last bend lined with hanging fake webs and low flickering lights. The noises had mostly faded, either the Class 1B students had run out of props, or they were just too far out now. Midoriya paused for a second, her head turning toward the dark beyond the trees. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, brows furrowing. Todoroki stepped closer. "Probably just part of the setup." Another crackle from a hidden speaker answered her question with a poorly timed ghostly mm. Midoriya sighed, but then something deeper, distant, rumbled low through the earth. Not loud. Just enough to feel in her shoes. A faint tremor in the ground. The birds went silent. She flinched instinctively, shoulders jerking. Before she could recover, Todoroki's hand came to rest lightly on her shoulder. She turned toward him, startled, and he seemed just as unsure. His hand lingered, just enough pressure to be grounding, not grabbing. "You okay?" he asked, voice lower now. "Closer." She nodded. "Why yeah. I think that didn't feel like the other effects." Todoroki didn't move his hand right away. His eyes studied hers, searching for something. "That sound wasn't part of the test." "I think you're right." They stood like that a beat longer than necessary. The ambient forest hum seemed to hush around them. Midoriya became acutely aware of how close they were. Of his hand. Of how warm it was through the thin fabric of her training jacket. And Todoroki, he didn't look away. Awkwardness crept into the silence like fog. She felt it settle into her chest, unsure whether to lean in or step back. Then, boom. A sharp explosion cracked through the air from the direction of the camp. Both of them turned instantly, instincts kicking in. That wasn't fake, Todoroki said, his voice now steely. No, Midoriya said breathlessly, eyes wide, sparks of green crackling along her arms. That was real. Smoke rose beyond the treeline, far enough that it hadn't reached them yet, but close enough that Midoriya's gut clenched. Todoroki's hand dropped from her shoulder, replaced by a controlled burst of frost swirling at his side. Midoriya activated full cowl, her face setting in focus. They didn't need to say anything else. They were already running. The forest was unnaturally quiet. Then came the smoke. It drifted in too fast, black and heavy, curling between the trees with a sickly scent that made Midoriya's lungs tighten on instinct. This isn't normal smoke, Todoroki said sharply, reaching for his ice. Cover your mouth. Now. Midoriya pulled her sleeve over her nose as a chill gust burst from Todoroki's palm, pushing the smoke back just enough for them to see bodies. Class 1BS scare crew collapsed. Todoroki. That's Juzo and Itsuka. Midoriya's heart spiked. Todoroki lowered his hand and muttered, poison gas. Why? We have to warn the others. Suddenly, a harsh buzz crackled in both their earpieces. This is Mandalay, her voice cut in shaky. Students, evacuate immediately. The forest is under attack, this is not a drill. Behind them, a sharp screech pierced the air. Midoriya spun around too late. A figure darted toward them from the shadows. Todoroki, she cried, instinctively shifting into full cowl as they both dodged. But the figure vanished, just a blur of giggles and sharp edges. Todoroki's eyes tracked the movement, his voice steady. There are more nearby. Then boom. An explosion roared deeper in the woods, orange light illuminating the treetops for a split second. Another shockwave followed. Trees snapped. Birds scattered into the air. Midoriya's BLD turned cold. That came from the base. More voices broke through the comms, panicked, scattered. A brief scream. Then a shout, Pixie Bob's been hit. She's down. No, Midoriya's thoughts raced. If Pixie Bob's out, that means the others are being targeted too. Koda. She stiffened. Her mind jolted to the memory of the boy's hideout, isolated, up the mountain, no one else nearby. He's all alone. Todoroki looked at her. You're going after him. Midoriya nodded, already shifting her stance. Can you handle getting the others out? I'll do what I can. Todoroki turned, his expression unreadable, but his hand briefly touched her shoulder. Be careful. The moment lingered, just a beat, until another explosion shattered it. Midoriya launched into the trees without hesitation, her limbs sparking with energy. She could feel the enemy closing in on all sides now, too many signatures, too much chaos. Behind her, somewhere in the shadows, Dabi's voice echoed low and amused. Let's make this night one to remember. Koda's scream tore through the air, and Izuku's heart jolted in her chest. Her body reacted before her mind could process the sound. Full cowl flared around her limbs, crackling with emerald lightning as she shot forward, pushing herself through the underbrush with desperate speed. Branches whipped at her uniform, the forest a blur of dark green and brown, but she didn't care. All that mattered was the sound, Koda's terrified voice, faint but unmistakable, calling out from the clearing ahead. Izuku crashed through the trees just as the massive, grotesque hand swung toward him. No you don't, she shouted, adrenaline flooding her veins. She hurled herself forward, her body moving in a blur. In an instant, she was between Koda and the villain, her arms wrapping around the boy's waist as she twisted midair to shield him. They slammed into the dirt with a bone-jarring thud, Izuku's back taking the brunt of the fall. Pain shot up her spine, but there was no time to focus on it. She rolled immediately, positioning herself between the boy and the looming threat. Her phone slipped from her pocket, tumbling across the ground, and cracked apart on a rock with a sickening crunch. She glanced at it, her stomach sinking as the screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass. The phone was dead. No way to call for help. No backup. Her pulse thudded in her ears as the villain straightened, his laugh like gravel scraping against stone. Muscles rippled under his skin, each flexing with monstrous strength as he eyed her, slow, deliberate, predatory. His lips curled into a wolfish grin. Looks like I found a hero already, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Or, half of one. Izuku's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't look away. She planted herself in front of Koda, blocking the villain's line of sight to him. "Don't touch him," Izuku said, her voice low but fierce. The villain tilted his head, taking her in like she was some kind of toy to be examined. "Feisty? That's supposed to scare me, little girl?" Izuku didn't respond. Her body hummed with tension, every muscle primed for the fight. Sweat trickled down her temple, stinging her eye, but she didn't blink. She couldn't. Not now. Behind her, Koda's voice quivered. "That's him? That's the guy who killed?" Izuku's throat tightened, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew. Muscular. She had read the reports, knew he was one of the League's most brutal members. The one responsible for taking Koda's parents, Pro-Hero's water hose, from him. The one who had left him alone in the world. Izuku's fists clenched so tightly her nails bit into her palms. This wasn't just any villain. This was the man who had caused so much pain. Her voice was barely a whisper as she muttered to herself, the weight of the situation sinking in. "I don't have a phone. No signal. No support. I can't run. I can't call for help." She swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. There was only one thing she had left, her quirk. Her training. Her will. And Koda. Turning her head just enough so the boy behind her could hear her, Izuku spoke, steady but fierce. "Koda," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "You need to stay back. Hide if you can. I'll protect you. I swear." But, his voice cracked with fear. He'll kill you." Izuku didn't flinch. She couldn't. Not when the stakes were this high. "That doesn't matter." Her eyes burned bright with energy, her voice growing stronger with every word. "I'm going to fight him. Because I'm the only one who can." Muscular's laughter echoed through the clearing, the sound like gravel grinding in his throat. He cracked his neck like he was preparing for a casual workout. "Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this." Izuku's breath steadied, the rush of adrenaline heightening every sense. Her pulse was thunderous, but her resolve was clear. She didn't have any other choice. "I won't let you hurt him," Izuku whispered under her breath, her fists tightening. Then louder, stronger, she shouted, the full force of her determination behind the words. "I'll stop you." With a surge of power, she pushed herself forward, full cowl igniting around her with a burst of green lightning. Her body exploded into motion, wind howling around them as she closed the distance. Her presence was overwhelming, fierce, a wave of unstoppable force. Koda gasped behind her as the air around them seemed to crackle with the weight of her resolve. In that moment, Izuku felt larger than life, stronger, brighter, more than just a girl caught in the middle of a fight. She was still Midoriya Izuku. She was still the same girl who would always stand between the people she cared about and the villains who would hurt them. She was still a hero. And she wasn't backing down. Izuku's heart slammed against her ribcage as she stood in front of Koda, every muscle in her body tense. The villain, Muscular, had peeled back his cloak, revealing the terrifying bulk of his body. His muscles, warped and grotesque, flexed as though they were alive. She could feel the weight of his strength in the air, crackling with menace. Muscular's smile was a cruel thing, stretching wide, teeth gleaming as he watched her with sickening amusement. "You're in my way, little hero." Izuku didn't flinch. She couldn't. Not now. She focused her mind, felt the hum of One for All bubbling within her as she activated full cowl, green lightning racing up her limbs. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But she had no choice. The forest echoed with distant screams, the chaos of the villain ambush spreading like wildfire. But Muscular wasn't here for random destruction. His orders were clear. "Find Bakugo," he muttered under his breath, cracking his knuckles as he stalked through the trees. "The boss wants that brat for something big." But along the way he picked up another scent, one that made his blood boil with anticipation. A hero in training and a kid. He smirked. Dieter. Now that little Dieter was proving surprisingly fun. The girl, Midoriya if he remembered right, was on the ground, coughing blood in her teeth, and still dragging herself to her feet. Stupidly stubborn. "You're wasting my time," Muscular sneered. "I've got a blonde brat to track down. Bakugo, right? But here you are, throwing yourself in the way like you actually matter." Izuku's heart skipped a beat. Bakugo he was after Kaken. She forced herself upright. "You're not getting anywhere near him," she rasped. "I won't let you." "Oh, that's so." Muscular chuckled, his muscles bulging grotesquely beneath his skin. "Then I'll break you first. Then I'll find him." His smile widened, cruel and sharp. "Might even kill this little kid while I'm at it, just to make a point." Izuku's blood went cold as Koda trembled behind her. No. She wouldn't let this monster near either of them or Bakugo. She clenched her fists, full cowl flaring to life once more, electricity crackling up her arms like living fury. You'll have to go through me first. Muscular grinned like she'd given him a gift. Oh, I plan to. Muscular surged forward with terrifying speed. Izuku barely had time to react as a massive fist swung at her. She managed to dodge by a hair, but the shockwave from his punch slammed her into the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. She barely had time to recover before he was on her again. The force of his blows was overwhelming. Each hit sent shockwaves through her body. She could feel the raw power of his quirk, the muscle fibers beneath his skin swelling like pythons, amplifying his strength beyond anything she had ever faced. Izuku gasped for air, struggling to keep up. She barely had time to react as his foot smashed into her chest, sending her flying backward. Pathetic, Muscular sneered. What's the point of your little quirk, huh? Just a few sparks, nothing more. Izuku gritted her teeth, rising to her feet. She couldn't think. The pain was unbearable, but she couldn't let him see it. She was the only thing standing between him and Kota. There was no room for doubt. She couldn't afford to fail. With a roar, she pushed herself forward, full cowl crackling around her limbs, her body surging with energy. She struck with everything she had, a punch aimed at his face. Her fist connected. Nothing. Muscular didn't even flinch. The punch didn't even make him stagger. Izuku's breath caught in her throat as she stumbled back. Her heart sank. She couldn't understand. She had used all of One for All's power in that blow, every ounce of strength, all of her speed, and it did nothing. Muscular chuckled, shaking his head. What a joke. Is that all you've got? What's the point of a hero who can't even break a sweat? Izuku's stomach turned, but she didn't back down. She forced herself to stand tall, her hands trembling from both exhaustion and fear. She couldn't lose. Not like this. Before she could react, Muscular lifted his arm, swinging it with the speed of a freight train. Izuku had only a split second to react, but it wasn't enough. His fist collided with her side, and she was sent sprawling across the ground. Her body screamed in agony as the ground scraped against her skin. Ugh, this can't be happening, Izuku breathed, struggling to push herself up. Her head spun. Muscular stood over her, mocking her pitiful struggle. You really think you can stop me with that weak little power of yours? My quirk muscle augmentation? He flexed his muscles, bulging grotesquely beneath his skin, rippling like a monster. I can push these fibers to their limit. It makes me faster, stronger. And you're just a little girl with a power that doesn't even touch me. Izuku's heart sank. His quirk, it was impossible. How could she win against something like this? But then Kota's voice broke through the haze of fear. Don't let him win, Izuku-chan. Kota shouted, a rock in his hand. He hurled it with trembling hands, his small form shaking as he faced the villain who had killed his parents. You're a hero. Fight back. Izuku's heart clenched at his words, her resolve hardening. She couldn't let him down. Not when he needed her the most. She pushed herself to her feet once more, her legs trembling but refusing to give. You're wrong, she breathed, glaring at Muscular. I'm not backing down. Muscular tilted his head, amusement dancing in his eyes as he turned toward Kota. Well, so this is the kid who lost his parents, huh? He sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Pathetic. They thought they could stop me and now they're little brats crying over it. You really think you can guilt me into feeling sorry for you, kid? Kota flinched but stood firm. You're the one who's pathetic. Izuku's heart thundered in her chest as she locked eyes with Muscular. His grin faded, replaced by something more dangerous. Enough talk. Without warning, he lunged at Kota, his massive hands reaching for the boy. No. Izuku screamed. She pushed her body into overdrive, her full cowl flaring brighter than ever, her limbs moving with a speed she didn't know she had. She collided with Muscular, using the last of her strength to ram into his side, driving him away from Kota. She wasn't fast enough. Muscular was already swinging again, his fist coming down like a hammer. But this time, Izuku wasn't just relying on speed. She focused everything, every ounce of power, every bit of One for All, into her broken arm. She swung it forward, catching his arm in midair, trapping it between his muscle fibers. It hurt. It hurt like hell, but she held on. You're wrong, Izuku muttered through gritted teeth. I'm not giving up. Muscular laughed, but it was cold, cruel. You think you're clever, don't you? Your quirk doesn't even matter in this fight. You're just weak. Izuku's heart pounded. She had one chance. There was no more room for hesitation. Her eyes locked onto Muscular's, his grin so full of malice only fueled her anger. She could feel the power of one for all building inside her, the weight of her decision settling like a heavy stone in her chest. "I'll stop you," she said, voice low but unwavering. And then she unleashed it. One for all. Full power. Her body exploded with energy. The force of her punch sent Muscular flying backward, crashing into the cliffside with a deafening crash. The impact was so powerful it shook the ground beneath them, and rocks shattered in all directions. Kota was thrown from the shockwave, but Izuku's reflexes kicked in. She leaped forward, grabbing his shirt with her teeth, and dragged him back to safety. She gasped for air, her entire body shaking. "We need to go," she panted, her voice hoarse. "Now." But before they could escape, Muscular's hand shot up from the wreckage, his body battered but still moving. Izuku's heart sank. "You really think that's enough to stop me?" he growled, his voice low and threatening. Izuku's breath hitched. Her full power had barely fazed him. "Impossible," she whispered, dread creeping into her chest. Muscular's grin only widened, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. "You'll regret that," he growled, his muscles rippling again, ready for the next round. Izuku had no time to think. She was out of ideas and the battle wasn't over. Izuku's mind raced, but there was no time to think. Muscular's relentless power, his nearly unbreakable form, had her on the edge of panic. She could feel the remnants of her strength fading, her body screaming in exhaustion as she braced herself for another round. The weight of her decision, the strain of using one for all at full power, was heavy, but she couldn't afford to let up. Kota was still here. She couldn't fail him. Muscular rose from the debris, cracking his neck like he was just warming up. His body, though battered, was still intact, muscles swelling beneath his skin, the grotesque fibers flexing and stretching as though they were hungry for more destruction. "You've got guts, kid." Muscular's voice was laced with a cruel amusement, his smile widening at her defiance. "But guts don't win fights. I told you before, you're just a girl." Izuku's fists clenched at her sides. She wasn't going to back down. She wouldn't let him tear through this place. Not after all this. "You want to try again?" Muscular taunted, his grin widening. "Go ahead. But this time I'm going to make sure you regret it." He rushed at her with terrifying speed. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. She was still recovering, every part of her still trembling from the strain of her last attack. There was no way she could match his speed again. But there was no choice. No other option. She pushed herself forward, her legs burning with the effort as she tried to match his pace. The earth cracked beneath her, her body propelled by desperation and adrenaline as she surged forward. Muscular was already there. His fist a blur as it crashed toward her. She barely managed to raise her arm in time to block, but the force was enough to send her sliding back, her feet dragging through the dirt. Pain bloomed in her shoulder, her bones rattling from the blow. She felt herself falter but caught her balance just in time. His punch had nearly broken her guard. If she hadn't blocked, she would have been out cold. But there was something different now. Something inside her sparked, a feeling she couldn't quite describe but knew she had to hold on to. She couldn't keep trading blows with him. She had to end this, now. Izuku's breath came in sharp bursts, her mind working frantically. The key to defeating Muscular wasn't in raw power, it was in closing the gap. His speed, his raw muscle strength, they were what made him unbeatable. But what if she couldn't beat him at his own game? No, she wasn't going to play his game. She had to change the rules. She backed away, dodging another swing from his massive arm. His muscles were too fast, too powerful. But if she could force him into a position where speed didn't matter, where he couldn't use his overwhelming strength, she might have a chance. Izuku's heart beat faster, the rhythm steadying as she found the answer. It wasn't about beating him in a race, it was about making his strength useless. She planted her feet, a sudden realization striking her. There was a way. A single chance. But she had to take it. "Let's see if you can keep up," she muttered under her breath. With a fierce shout, Izuku sprang forward again, her body crackling with the remnants of One for All. But this time she wasn't looking for a direct hit. She aimed for his muscle fibers, targeting his body's weakest points, the areas that couldn't move or flex as easily. Muscular grinned, his eyes narrowing as he anticipated her attack, but Izuku's plan was already in motion. She swung her arm with all the force she could muster, not at his face but at the space between his ribs. She smashed her fist into his body, forcing her arm to slip between the layers of muscle. The impact sent waves of pain up her arm, but it was enough to trap it there, the muscle fibers tensing against her hand, unable to contract and push her away. Muscular's grin faltered for a moment, surprise flashing across his face as she fought to keep her position. The air felt heavier around them as Izuku clenched her teeth, her arm locked in place by the sheer weight of his strength. "Gotcha," she gasped, her voice strained but filled with determination. Muscular's face twisted in rage. He tried to pull back but her arm was trapped. His muscles shifted and contorted beneath her, but her grip was firm. Izuku's body screamed for her to stop, the pain nearly unbearable, but she ignored it. She couldn't stop. Not when this was her only shot. She could feel the power of One for All building again. She didn't have much left, but it would be enough. It had to be. "I'm not letting you hurt anyone else," Izuku yelled. With a final desperate effort, she released all the energy she had left. One for All surged through her, her body exploding with power. She pushed through the pain, forcing her broken arm to drive into Muscular's side. The force of the punch was beyond anything she had done before. The shockwave ripped through the ground beneath them, sending cracks up the cliffside. But Muscular wasn't done. Even as he reeled from the blow, he surged forward once more, his muscles still bulging with unnatural strength. You're persistent," he growled, his tone filled with both admiration and disdain. "But I'm still going to crush you." Izuku stumbled back, her vision swimming. She had nothing left. Muscular was already recovering and she didn't have the energy to stop him. Her chest heaved, sweat dripping down her face. Her limbs felt like they were made of lead. And then from behind her she heard Koda's voice, loud, clear and full of defiance. "Don't you dare hurt her." Izuku's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see the boy standing tall, his hands trembling but resolute. He was still here. He was using his quirk and making little splashes of water directed to Muscular. He was still fighting. Muscular's eyes narrowed as he locked onto the boy. But this time, Izuku wasn't going to let him finish what he started. She wasn't going to lose. Not after everything they had been through. She drew in a breath, her body screaming with exhaustion but still refusing to give up. "Muscular," she whispered, barely able to form the words. "I'll stop you even if it kills me." Izuku's vision blurred, and her body trembled, every muscle protesting against the unbearable strain. Muscular's form loomed over her like a mountain, his wild grin stretched as he prepared to strike again. Her thoughts raced, desperate to find a way out. She couldn't do this alone. She had already given everything, there was nothing left in her. But something was missing. Something she had overlooked. Koda's voice pierced through the haze of exhaustion, sharp and filled with resolve. "Izuku, please." She could barely look back but she felt the weight of his words, the strength behind them. The truth settled in her chest. She couldn't fail him. She couldn't. And then, as if something had clicked into place, Izuku felt a surge of power, a different kind of energy. It wasn't hers. It was something older, something far more ancient. A whisper in the back of her mind, soft at first, then clearer. "Izuku." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't her voice. Another voice, one she had never heard but somehow knew. A presence that felt familiar, yet distant. She fought to stay on her feet, but the world around her swayed. Muscular's hulking form moved again, preparing to crush her once more. And then it hit her, she wasn't alone. She was never alone. In a flash, her mind was flooded with images, faces she had never seen, yet somehow recognized. The past wielders of One for All. Their voices, their thoughts, all of them reaching out to her now. Izuku's breath caught as the voice of the first wielder rang through her mind. "Izuku, you carry our strength. Use it now. With our power you have the will to stand." And with that, Izuku's vision cleared. The weight of the past, the burden of One for All, surged through her, pushing her past her limits. She felt her body surge with new strength, energy flooding her limbs. She felt them, all of them, together guiding her, pulling her forward. In that moment she was not just Izuku Midoriya. She was the legacy of all the past wielders who had carried One for All before her. Their hope, their strength, their will to protect, all of it coursed through her. Muscular lunged at her again, his fist like a freight train. But this time, Izuku wasn't afraid. She planted her feet. Every muscle screamed in protest but she ignored it. The power of One for All, unleashed in full, filled her veins and she felt it, everything. She lifted her broken arm, now crackling with an intense, unstoppable force. The strength in her bones was like nothing she had ever experienced, like she had become a storm, a force of nature that nothing could stand against. With a roar, she moved her arm forward. "I'll stop you. Detroit Smash." She screamed, the words carrying every ounce of determination she had left. Her fist collided with Muscular's chest with a force that was more than a punch. It was a tidal wave of power. The impact was so intense that the air itself seemed to shudder. Muscular's eyes widened in disbelief as his body was sent flying backward, crashing into the rock face with enough force to shatter the stone. Izuku didn't stop. She didn't let up. She pushed herself forward, the power of One for All flowing through her, and with one final deafening punch she drove her fist into the villain's chest, her full strength exploding in a shockwave that tore through the cliffside. Muscular's massive body crumpled to the ground, the monstrous flexing of his muscles finally giving way under the force of her blow. The world around them fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the distant sound of rocks tumbling down the cliff. Izuku stood there, panting heavily, her body trembling with the aftershocks of the battle. She was exhausted, more than exhausted, but the victory was hers. Muscular lay unconscious, crumpled at the base of the cliff. For a moment, all Izuku could hear was the rapid beat of her heart in her ears, the buzzing in her head, the overwhelming feeling of something she had never experienced before: complete exhaustion, but also satisfaction. She glanced back to Kota, who stood frozen, wide-eyed, his chest rising and falling in quick breaths. "Izuku, you did it," he breathed, his voice thick with awe and disbelief. Izuku, still reeling from the immense power she had just tapped into, gave him a shaky smile, though she could barely hold herself upright. "I told you I'd protect you, didn't I?" she whispered, but even her voice sounded weak, almost distant. "My hero," Kota said as his eyes bursted with tears. She staggered slightly, her body too drained to keep her standing. But as she fell to her knees, the voice of the past wielders echoed once more in her mind, this time with a final, reassuring tone. "You have the strength to protect, Izuku. Always." And with that, she allowed herself to collapse, her body giving in to the exhaustion that had built up over the course of the fight. The battle was over. They had won. The smoke stung her eyes. Izuku stood over Muscular's crumpled form, her chest heaving. The villain lay embedded in the cliffside, limbs slack, his grotesque muscle fibers deflating like torn rope. His artificial eye had popped loose in the impact, now cracked and lifeless in the dirt. But Izuku didn't relax. Her arm, broken and useless, hung limp at her side. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Every nerve screamed. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She turned to Kota, who was still staring at Muscular's body, frozen. His small fists were clenched, eyes wide in disbelief. "Izuku, is he?" "He's out cold," she rasped, forcing strength into her voice. "He's not waking up anytime soon." She swallowed, pushing through the pain. "But this fight isn't over." Kota looked at her, confused. "I have to warn the others. Mr. Aizawa. Mandalay. The League is here for more than just destruction. That guy, he was looking for Bakugo." Kota's eyes widened, but Izuku didn't stop. "We can't drag him," she said, nodding at Muscular. "And we don't have time. But there's fire spreading, and I need your help." "And my help?" She crouched, her voice soft but urgent. "You're Quirk. You're a water type, right? We needed to get out of here. You saved me once already. I need you to do it again." Kota stared at her for a long second, then nodded slowly. Izuku smiled just a little. "Good. Climb on." He clambered onto her back, arms wrapping tightly around her neck. His grip trembled, but it was there. He trusted her. She winced, adjusting her balance, then turned toward the burning forest. "Hold on tight." And then she ran. The smoke curled through the trees, thick and stinging. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat echoed in her skull like a war drum. Kota's arms tightened around her shoulders as Izuku ran, feet pounding against scorched dirt, dodging fallen branches, leaping over smoldering roots. Her body ached. Her arm was ruined. But she couldn't stop. "They're after Kaken." That was all she could think. "They're after him. They came here for him." A shadow emerged through the haze ahead, tall, tense, familiar. She knew the posture instantly. "Aizawa-sensei," she cried. His head turned sharply. He saw her, bloody, bruised, Kota on her back, and moved fast. "Izuku, what happened?" She didn't slow. She skid to a halt just in front of him, panting hard. "It's Muscular," she rasped. "I fought him. He's down, I think, for good. But he said something. He said they're here to take Kaken." Aizawa's eyes narrowed behind his goggles. "Bakugo." Izuku nodded, chest heaving. "He said his name specifically. They're targeting him." She turned, eyes burning with urgency. "We have to warn everyone. Please, you have to let them fight back. We don't have time to hold back anymore." A beat. Then Aizawa placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Relay that to Mandalay. Tell her, all students are authorized to engage. Permission granted." Izuku didn't waste a second. She turned and sprinted toward the ridge where she remembered seeing Mandalay earlier, lungs screaming, Kota clinging tightly to her back. "Mandalay," she shouted the second she saw her. The pro-hero spun toward her, eyes wide. "Midoriya." "What?" "They're after Kaken," Izuku cried. "Muscular said the League is here to take him. And Aizawa-sensei, he gave the order, tell everyone. All students are allowed to fight. They can use their quirks." Mandalay's expression hardened in an instant. She nodded once, sharply, and raised a hand to her temple. Her lips moved silently as her telepathy quirk activated. "To all students. This is Mandalay. Eraserhead has given new instructions. You are permitted to use your quirks to defend yourselves. Fight back and stay alive. Also, be warned, the villains are after a student. Their target is Kaken. Protect him at all costs." Izuku sagged slightly, breath catching. One step forward. One more bit of hope. But there was no time to rest. She bent to let Kota slide off her back. The boy stared up at her, eyes still full of fear, but something stronger underneath now too. "Trust. You're going back," he whispered. Izuku smiled tiredly. "I have to. I promised I'd protect everyone." She turned back to the burning woods. Somewhere out there, Kaken was still fighting. Still being hunted. And Izuku would not let them take him. Izuku's feet hammered against the forest floor, her lungs burning with every breath. The smoke and ash stung her eyes, but she couldn't stop. "Not now. Kaken, where are you?" The thought kept pushing her forward, heart thudding painfully in her chest. She had to find him before it was too late. But then the shadows around her seemed to ripple, and a giant, monstrous claw shot out from the darkness, impossibly large, stretching toward her like a predator's strike. Izuku's body screamed at her to move. She slammed her hand down on the ground to twist herself out of the way. But her legs, her entire body, wasn't listening anymore. The adrenaline that had kept her going began to drain away, leaving behind only the sting of her injuries. Her broken arm burned with every movement, and the rest of her body was racked with exhaustion. The world began to blur, her vision hazy, and the pain, sharp and unforgiving, shackled her in place. She couldn't move. A scream tore from her throat, but it wasn't enough to stop the incoming strike. The claw was mere feet away, the shadows stretching toward her, the weight of it threatening to crush her. Then whoosh, a sudden rush of wind. Mizo Shoji's arm shot out, extending into multiple thick limbs that caught the giant claw mid-swipe. With a grunt, he yanked the attack to the side, the force of his muscles straining under the weight of it. "Midoriya." Shoji's voice was a sharp snap, full of urgency. "You're hurt. You need to get out of here." Izuku gasped for air, her hands pressing against the dirt to try and push herself up. She could feel the pain in her arm, her side, every inch of her body screaming in protest. But she couldn't stay down. I have to." Shoji's expression softened as he stepped in front of her, blocking the remaining shadows. "No," he said, voice firm. "You've done enough. You can barely move." Before Izuku could protest, his tentacle-like limbs extended, wrapping around her torso, and he gently but firmly hoisted her up onto his back. "I'm carrying you. You're not getting anywhere like this." Izuku winced as her injuries protested the movement, but she couldn't stop him. She couldn't keep going like this. The weight of her own body was too much, the pain too great. She let out a weak, strained breath, her vision swimming. "Kaken?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. "He'll be fine," Shoji said quietly, though his tone was more uncertain than he let on. "We'll make sure of it." He started moving again, his limbs extending to avoid obstacles in their path, carrying Izuku through the dense forest. The shadows of the villains were still lurking out there, and Shoji was doing everything he could to keep them from following. But the weight of it all pressed on Izuku's chest, and her mind kept circling back to the same thought. They're after Kaken and she had to make sure he was safe. As Shoji carried Izuku, his multiple arms steadying her on his back, the sound of distant growls and shifting shadows filled the air. Izuku's head swam in and out of focus, the pain in her body still unbearable. Her heart pounded with each step Shoji took. "Shoji," she whispered weakly, "what was that thing?" "The shadow monster." Shoji's expression tightened as he maneuvered through the forest, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "That was Tokoyami's dark shadow." Izuku blinked in confusion. "Tokoyami's? But how?" "It's out of control," Shoji said, his tone grim. "Dark shadow's power is linked to the moon. The more darkness there is, the more volatile it becomes. Right now it's acting on instinct. And it's huge." Izuku's stomach turned. She knew Dark Shadow was a powerful quirk, but she hadn't anticipated something like this. Tokoyami, he can't control it? Izuku asked, trying to focus as she processed the information. He can, Shoji replied, his voice low. But not when it's this strong. It's too much for him. It's attacking anything and everything in its path. Izuku bit her lip, her thoughts racing. Tokoyami's dark shadow wasn't just a strong quirk, it was like a force of nature, an overwhelming power that could destroy everything in its way when it was pushed too far. She knew Tokoyami wasn't the type to give up, but if he couldn't control it, what would happen to him, and everyone around him? We need to get to him, Izuku muttered, the words a strained whisper. If we don't stop Dark Shadow, it'll tear the whole forest apart. Shoji nodded, his face hardening. I know. We'll find Tokoyami and help him. But first we need to get you to safety. Izuku could feel the weight of their situation pressing on her. The others, Tokoyami, Kaken, they were all out there. And she wasn't sure how long any of them could last, especially with a rampaging Dark Shadow on the loose. But as Shoji's arms shifted and adjusted, carrying her with strength and purpose, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. We're not done yet. Dark Shadow rampaged through the forest, knocking over trees with each swing of its massive claws. Izuku barely dodged one swipe, the wind from it crashing into her. Shoji grabbed her, pulling her behind a thick tree trunk just in time. The ground shook as Dark Shadow destroyed everything in its path. Stay low, Shoji urged, keeping Izuku steady. Dark Shadow continued its relentless attack, tearing through the trees. Izuku's body ached, but she couldn't focus on her pain. Her mind raced between saving Bakugo or Tokoyami. But everything was happening too fast. Glancing at the beast, Shoji said, "We need light to calm him down, but Bakugo is still out there. The villains are after him." Izuku's heart squeezed as Tokoyami's voice echoed in her mind. "Please, save the others. Please save the others. Forget about me." Izuku clenched her fists torn. Could she leave Tokoyami to fight alone when he needed help? She couldn't make a choice. "Light," Shoji urged. "But you also need to decide who to save first." Izuku hesitated. Her chest tightened. She couldn't choose between the two. "I can't make that call," she whispered. "I can't choose." Shoji's eyes softened. "Then what do we do?" Izuku closed her eyes, the chaos of the forest swirling around her. A plan formed. It was risky, but it was their only shot. Dark Shadow tore through the forest, its monstrous claws slashing at everything in its path. The trees groaned under its fury as it rampaged, its growls shaking the air. Izuku gritted her teeth, trying to stay steady despite the agony in her body. The pain from her earlier injuries was starting to catch up with her, but she couldn't let it stop her. Shoji pulled her behind a large tree as another swipe of Dark Shadow's claw missed them by inches. "It's getting worse," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the shadowy monster. "Fumicage's regret is feeding it, and it's out of control." Izuku nodded, sweat dripping down her face. She could feel Tokoyami's struggle, his pain, and it was feeding Dark Shadow's rage. She couldn't let this continue. "We need to stop this," Izuku said, voice tight with urgency. "But we can't just keep dodging forever. We need a distraction." Shoji looked at her, understanding instantly. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." Izuku nodded, eyes steely. "I need you to use your quirk. Create duplicate arms to distract Dark Shadow so we can get past him. We'll find Bakugo." Shoji immediately got to work, his body shifting as several duplicate arms sprouted from his back and sides. The extra limbs stretched and reached for Dark Shadow, moving quickly to catch its attention. It worked. The shadow monster swung wildly, trying to lash out at the extra limbs, leaving an opening for Izuku and Shoji to move. "Now!" Izuku shouted, pushing herself to her feet. "Let's go find Kaken." Shoji nodded, moving beside her, his arms still fighting off Dark Shadow. "I've got your back. Let's go." With the distraction in place, they sprinted toward the area where Bakugo was last seen. The forest blurred past them, but Izuku's focus was sharp. Kaken had to be close. They had to get to him before the villains did. Shoji and Izuku arrived at the clearing, breathless but determined. Bakugo and Todoroki were fighting off Moonfish, who was circling them with his jagged teeth. Shoji quickly scanned the area, his eyes sharp. "Todoroki, Kaken, use your quirks. We need light to calm Dark Shadow down." Before either of them could respond, a chilling sound pierced the air. A jagged tooth flew at them with deadly precision, but before it could reach its mark, Dark Shadow's massive claw slammed down, crushing Moonfish's attack. The forest shook as the shadow beast tore through the ground, swiping at Moonfish with overwhelming force. Bakugo and Todoroki froze in shock, staring at the destruction. Izuku's plan had worked. She had lured Dark Shadow to their location by creating decoys with Shoji's replicant arms. Izuku let out a breath of relief, her heart pounding. Kekken. I don't have to choose. I can save everyone. Bakugo and Todoroki were still processing the turn of events. Shoji spoke up, urgency in his voice. Use your quirks to make light. We need to calm him down. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, but before Todoroki could act, Bakugo held up a hand, signaling for him to wait. Moonfish, enraged by his failed attack, regained his footing, his grotesque teeth snapping as he shouted, "Only I get to hurt the kids." He lunged at Dark Shadow, teeth gnashing. But the shadow creature didn't even flinch. Dark Shadow grabbed Moonfish in its massive claw, squeezing tightly. With one savage motion, it smashed Moonfish through several trees, leaving the villain battered and incapacitated. Izuku's eyes widened in shock as Moonfish was discarded like a rag doll, thrown into the forest with brutal force. With Moonfish defeated, Bakugo and Todoroki wasted no time. Using their quirks in unison, Bakugo's explosion and Todoroki's ice bathed the area in blinding light, and slowly Dark Shadow began to shrink. The immense, shadowy mass retracted back into Fumikage, who collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily but regaining control. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief as Dark Shadow returned to its dormant form. We did it. We saved him. Fumikage took a shaky breath, his body still tense as he stood up. Thank you, Bakugo Todoroki. I'm sorry for what happened, he said, his voice quiet, full of remorse. Bakugo grunted but gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Todoroki, still focused but calm, gave Fumikage a reassuring glance. You don't need to apologize. It's over now. Shoji smiled, relieved that Fumikage was back in control. Yeah, it's good to see you're okay. We were all worried for a bit there. Fumikage's head dropped slightly, his gaze avoiding theirs. I couldn't control it. When I saw Shoji's arm— Stop. Shoji interrupted him gently, stepping forward and placing a hand on Fumikage's shoulder. You don't need to feel guilty about that. Dark Shadow's power is hard to control and we all know that. He gave Fumikage a small, reassuring smile. We're fine and we're all still standing. Izuku nodded in agreement. Exactly. We all know the risks and we handled it. The most important thing now is to stay focused. Fumikage glanced up, his guilt still clear in his eyes, but he nodded. Thank you, everyone. Izuku quickly shifted the conversation. Our priority is to get Bakugo to safety. The villains are still after him. She looked over at Bakugo, her expression serious. We need to get you back to the facility, Kaken. And we're going to do it the fastest way possible. Bakugo bristled, his fists tightening at his sides. I don't need any DMN help, he snapped. I can get back on my own. You think I need babysitters? Izuku frowned, stepping forward with determination. We can't take any chances, Kaken. You're the target and we're not about to let something happen to you because of your pride. Yeah, Shoji added with a calm tone, this isn't about pride. It's about keeping you safe. If we all stick together, it'll be easier for all of us. Fumikage, still standing a little apart from the group, spoke up quietly. It might not be what you want, Kaken, but this is the best plan. We have the strength to protect you. Bakugo turned away, grumbling under his breath, but it was clear he was relenting. Fine, he muttered. But I'm not just some fragile kid you need to hold hands with, got it? Izuku couldn't help but smile at his stubbornness. We get it, Kaken. Just trust us on this one, okay? Todoroki looked at Izuku with an approving glance. We should keep moving. It's safer if we stay in motion. With that, the group formed up around Bakugo, their steps careful but resolute. As they made their way through the forest, Izuku scanned the area constantly, aware that the villains could be lurking anywhere. Shoji took the lead, his scouting abilities allowing him to sense any threats ahead. There's a narrow path up ahead, he said, pointing. It'll be faster, but we'll have to be quick. Lead the way, Izuku said, falling in line behind Shoji. As they followed Shoji's lead down the narrow forest path, the trees pressed in around them, the light above fragmented and fading. Every step snapped twigs or brushed against damp leaves, but the silence between them felt louder than any sound. Midoriya moved with practiced care, scanning their surroundings, her green eyes sharp beneath a furrowed brow. Todoroki walked beside her, steady and quiet. His gaze drifted toward her more than once, catching the tension in her shoulders, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking too hard. Shoji raised a hand or an ear. Hold up. Something up ahead. Everyone stilled. Midoriya instinctively stepped closer to Todoroki, their shoulders almost brushing. She turned slightly toward him, her voice low. "You okay?" He nodded, but after a beat, he tilted his head, meeting her eyes. "You're asking me that? You haven't stopped scanning the trees since we started." Midoriya smiled faintly, the corner of her mouth twitching up. "Guess I'm used to worrying about everyone else." Todoroki's voice lowered, softer now. "You always do that." "What?" "Put everyone first. Even when you're exhausted. Even when you're scared." She looked down, then back at him. "That's what heroes are supposed to do." "Maybe," he said. "But someone should be looking out for you too." Midoriya blinked, momentarily stunned. Her heart gave a traitorous flutter before she caught it, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Thanks. That means a lot." Todoroki glanced away as if realizing what he'd just said, but he didn't take it back. Shoji waved them forward again. "Clear. Let's move." They started walking once more, this time with Midoriya and Todoroki side by side, not by strategy. Bakugo, on the other hand, stuck close to them. He glared ahead, still clearly annoyed, but at least he was moving with the group. Noticing Icy Hot getting giggly with Deku. "If anything happens to me, I'll make sure you all regret it," he muttered, half under his breath. Todoroki, walking beside him, shot him a sidelong glance. "That's not exactly reassuring, Bakugo." "Shut it, ice nerd," Bakugo snapped, but there was less fire in his voice than usual. He seemed to trust the others in his own way, even if he didn't want to admit it. Izuku let out a soft chuckle, glancing at Shoji. "We've got this. No matter what, we'll get him to safety." Shoji nodded. "Yeah. We've all got each other's backs." Fumikage, walking quietly behind them, watched the group with a quiet sense of gratitude. "We'll make it back together," he said softly. Izuku's resolve hardened as she kept scanning the surroundings. The villains would be relentless. But with all of them working together, nothing would stop them from protecting each other. "Let's stick close," she said firmly. "We're not letting anything happen to you, Kakin." Bakugo scowled, but a glint of something softer, perhaps appreciation, flashed in his eyes for just a moment before he turned away again. Yeah. Just don't slow me down." And so, with their paths aligned, the Bakugo SRT squad continued forward, their eyes set on the safety of the facility, knowing the worst was far from over, but also knowing they wouldn't let anything tear them apart. As the Bakugo SRT team continued their route through the forest, they suddenly stumbled upon Achiko and Tsuyu. The two were standing together, looking relieved but tense, and it wasn't long before they noticed the group's arrival. Achiko blinked in surprise, her gaze shifting between Shoji, Todoroki, and Izuku. "You all made it?" she asked, a hint of relief in her voice. Before anyone could answer, the scene was interrupted by a sudden movement. Himiko Toga, with BLD still staining her hands, stood by Achiko. She had been draining the Gravity Girl's BLD but stopped abruptly, eyes narrowing at the sight of the approaching group. With a quick motion, she pushed Achiko aside as if she no longer had time to waste on her. Toga's gaze flickered across the group, lingering a moment on Izuku before her face flushed a soft pink. She quickly looked away, clearly embarrassed by the sudden shift in attention. "T's too many of you. This isn't my fight," she muttered, turning away, ready to retreat. "Achiko," Izuku called, moving forward to reach her, but Toga had already darted into the trees. "Wait. She's escaping," Izuku shouted, but Tsuyu quickly blocked his path. "No," Tsuyu said firmly. "Her quirk is too dangerous right now. We don't know what she's capable of if we push her." Izuku hesitated, nodding reluctantly. "Right, we'll let her go for now." He turned to see Achiko, who had scrambled to her feet. "Are you all right?" Achiko smiled weakly, rubbing her wrist where Toga had drained her BLD. "I'll be fine. Just a little dizzy. Thanks for coming." Tsuyu's expression softened. "We should hurry. It's not safe here." Izuku nodded. "We can't waste any more time. We need to get you two back to the facility. The more people we have, the better we'll be able to protect everyone." But before Izuku could suggest anything further, Tsuyu and Achiko exchanged a concerned glance. "Wait," Achiko began, her voice trembling. "Where's Bakugo?" Izuku, Shoji, and Todoroki stopped in their tracks, looking around. Fumikage and Bakugo weren't with them anymore. Izuku's stomach tightened. Nowhere did they go. Suddenly, a shadow loomed above them. A masked figure, perched high on a tree branch, surveyed the group with a smirk. Well, the villain said in a voice that was almost playful. "Looks like I've found you." His tone was low, dripping with arrogance. "You heroes really don't know when to quit, do you? Shoji's eyes narrowed, taking a defensive stance in front of the others. Who are you? The masked villain grinned beneath his mask. The name's not important. What's important is that I've just secured your precious Bakugo. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? Where is he? The villain's laugh echoed through the trees, causing an unsettling chill to spread. I've turned him into a marble. He's in a safe place at least for now. You heroes really think you deserve someone like him? He'll shine brighter on our side. He's far more valuable as a villain, don't you think? Izuku's BLD ran cold, his body trembling with a mixture of anger and panic. Give him back. Now. She yelled, her voice hoarse with desperation. I don't care what you've done to him. He's not yours. The villain's smirk deepened, though his eyes behind the mask seemed to glint with amusement. You think I'll just hand him over? Not a chance. You've already lost. Izuku clenched her fists, her mind racing. We won't stop until we get him back. The masked villain tilted his head, amused by Izuku's response. Then come and try. But you'll have to catch me first. With a final mocking chuckle, the villain leaped into the trees, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Izuku stood frozen, her heart pounding. We need to get him back. Now. Shoji quickly nodded, his tone urgent. We're going after him. We can't waste any more time. Let's go now. Without hesitation, the group set off, determination in their eyes as they followed the trail left by the masked villain, ready to do whatever it took to rescue Bakugo and stop the villains from getting their hands on him. When they reached the Vanguard Action Squad's rendezvous point, chaos erupted. Dabi's voice sliced through the air as he ordered Mr. Compress to dodge his incoming attack. Without hesitation, Mr. Compress used his quirk to compress himself, narrowly avoiding Dabi's explosive blast of flames. Todoroki reacted just as quickly, managing to evade the fiery onslaught. But Izuku and Shoji weren't as fortunate. The flames crashed into them, searing Izuku's right arm and Shoji's left. Pain radiated through their bodies, but there was no time to process it. They had to keep moving. Suddenly, Twice appeared behind Todoroki, grinning like a maniac. His twin knives slashed through the air, but Todoroki was ready. With a sharp swipe of his hand, he sent a wall of ice to block the attack. Twice staggered back, surprised by the force. Himiko wasted no time either, her eyes locking onto Izuku. You look like you could use more BLD, she taunted, her smile wicked as she lunged. Izuku barely had time to react before Shoji swung his arm and smacked Himiko off him, sending her tumbling away. Get off him. Shoji barked, his face tight with anger. Todoroki was still busy keeping Twice at bay, his ice attacks freezing anything that came too close. Mr. Compress, still unshaken, walked over to Dabi, preparing to hand over the marbles containing Fumikage and Bakugo. But when he reached into his pocket, nothing. He searched again, his hand frantically feeling around. What's going on? He muttered. Shoji's grin was sharp. I took them, he said, holding up the marbles he'd snatched as soon as they hit the ground. Before Mr. Compress could react, the ground shook. The Nomu, a terrifying mass of muscle and brutality, appeared, followed by Kurogiri, who began opening his warp gate, ready to teleport them all away. Himiko, Twice, and the Nomu rushed into the portal, disappearing in a swirl of black mist. Mr. Compress cursed. Those aren't the real ones, he said, and just as Shoji's hand clenched around the marbles, they suddenly turned to ice. The cold spread up his fingers. He blinked in shock. What? The villain chuckled darkly, pulling off his mask. His tongue flicked out, revealing the real marbles hidden beneath. You kids thought you had a shot at saving them. False hope, he sneered, popping his mask back into place. A bad habit of mine. The magician made his way toward the portal, but just as he was about to disappear, a blast rang out. Yuga, who had been quietly watching, fired his naval laser, hitting Mr. Compress square in the face. The mask shattered, and with it, the marbles containing Fumikage and Bakugo fell from his mouth. Izuku's heart surged. This is it. But the pain from his injuries was too much. His legs gave way and he collapsed to the ground, gasping. Shoji and Todoroki, undeterred, bolted toward the marbles. Shoji reached Fumikage's marble first, securing it with a firm grip. Todoroki wasn't far behind, stretching out his hand toward the marble containing Bakugo, but just as he was about to touch it, Dabi snatched it away. You're too slow, Dabi taunted, holding the marble high in the air. This one's mine now. Izuku's breath hitched. No. He shouted, forcing himself to his feet, desperate to stop them. He tried to reach out, but his body wouldn't cooperate. Dabi smirked and turned to Mr. Compress. "Deactivate your quirk," he ordered. The magician did as commanded, and the marbles in his hands began to shimmer before cracking open, releasing Fumikage and Bakugo from their marble prisons. Izuku's heart raced. Not again. Dabi and Mr. Compress wasted no time. As the portal shimmered open, they began to step through, Bakugo still in Dabi's grip. Izuku staggered forward, his legs shaky. "Kaken," he cried out, his voice breaking. "I won't let you take him." But Bakugo's cold voice came through the noise. "Stay back, Deku." His words hit like a punch to the gut. "I'm not your responsibility. Don't come after me." Izuku's heart shattered. "No, Kaken. Please." But it was too late. With a final look, Bakugo was pulled into the portal, and the Vanguard Action Squad disappeared, leaving nothing but the echoes of Izuku's anguish. Izuku collapsed to the ground, the weight of failure crashing down on him. "Kaken." His voice cracked with grief. He couldn't save him. Not this time. Midoriya's legs gave out the moment the villains vanished into Kurogiri's warp gate with Bakugo. "Kaken." She choked out, reaching into empty space, but the portal snapped shut before her fingertips could graze it. Silence followed. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on his chest harder than any injury. Then came the pain. Her entire body trembled as her adrenaline ebbed. Her right arm, burned, broken, useless, hung limp at her side. Her breathing grew shallow, vision swimming with black spots. Todoroki shouted something, maybe her name. Shoji was by her side, gripping her shoulder. Someone else called for help. But it was all a blur. The last thing Midoriya saw before the world tilted sideways was the shattered forest, the fading traces of battle, and no sign of Bakugo. Darkness swallowed him whole. When Midoriya awoke, everything was white. Ceiling, walls, sheets. Her arms were heavy, encased in thick plaster from shoulder to wrist. She blinked slowly, the soft beeping of a heart monitor grounding him to reality. Hospital. She tried to move, but pain flared in his limbs, sharp and immediate. A nurse noticed and stepped in with calm reassurance, telling him he'd passed out from exhaustion and burns. That she'd been lucky. But Midoriya didn't feel lucky. Her throat tightened. She couldn't stop replaying it. The moment Bakugo vanished, the last words he said, "Don't come after me." Midoriya clenched her jaw, eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. Bakugo was gone. And Midoriya had failed to save him. "Midoriya," a familiar voice said gently. She turned her head. Aizawa stood by the window, his expression unreadable but tired. There was a tension in his shoulders she hadn't seen before. "You're awake. Good." Midoriya tried to sit up but winced as a jolt of pain shot through her body. "Kaken, he's gone," Aizawa said, voice low. "They got away with him." She swallowed hard, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "I couldn't stop them. You did everything you could," he said, stepping closer. "You bought us time. You fought with everything you had." Midoriya clenched her jaw, her fingers twitching against the casts. But it wasn't enough. Aizawa didn't argue. He just stood there, silently watching over her like a shadow. Because even if the fight was over for now, the war was far from done. Midoriya sank back against the pillows, the hospital sheets scratchy against her skin. The sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mixing with the dull ache thudding through her ribs and limbs. Her breath came shallow, more from the weight in her chest than the injuries. Kaken was gone. The thought looped endlessly in her head, louder than the beep of the heart monitor. She replayed the moment over and over, the explosion of light, the crack of impact, his scream. The way her fingers had just brushed his hand before he was torn away. Her fists trembled, tight around nothing. It wasn't fair. He'd been right there. Midoriya stared at the ceiling, blinking through the blur in her vision. She could still feel the raw heat of her power raging, the way her bones had cracked and skin had split to keep fighting. It hadn't been enough. She hadn't been enough. She wasn't All Might. She wasn't even close. The door clicked, breaking the silence. Midoriya wiped at her face just as the footsteps entered, soft, hesitant. Voices murmured outside. Her classmates. She didn't know what she'd say to them. Would they blame her? No, they wouldn't. Not them. Not Ida, who always believed in doing what was right. Not Uraraka, who cried when strangers were hurt. Not Todoroki, who never said much but always saw everything. Still, shame burned hot under her skin. She turned her face toward the window again, jaw clenched, holding herself together by a thread. Let them come. She'd face them. Because if she couldn't bring Kaken back yet, she'd at least be strong enough to carry the guilt. She had to be. The door creaked open. Midoriya. Uraraka's voice was soft, laced with worry. Can we come in? Midoriya turned back to the room, blinking the last of the tears away. She nodded weakly, her throat too tight for words. Uraraka stepped in first, followed by Ida, Todoroki, and Kirishima. They looked exhausted, mud still clung to their boots and there were bandages wrapped around arms and foreheads. No one came out of that fight clean. Are you okay? Uraraka asked, taking a tentative step closer. You scared us. Midoriya managed a small, crooked smile. I've been better. That's understandable, Todoroki said, his voice low. His eyes lingered on the casts covering her arms. But you're alive. That's what matters right now. I was so sure, Kirishima started, then trailed off. He sat on the edge of the chair beside her hospital bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tight. I thought if I trained hard enough, if I got stronger, they wouldn't need to leave me behind. Midoriya watched him quietly, her body still sore beneath the sheets. You weren't left behind, she said softly. Kirishima let out a breath, eyes still on the floor. Felt like it. You went out there, risked everything to bring him back. And me? I was stuck in a classroom while my friends were fighting. Midoriya's fingers curled gently into the blanket. It wasn't about who was strong enough. We were all just desperate and scared. You would have come if you could. I know that. He finally looked up at her, guilt etched into his expression. But you got hurt. If I'd been there, you couldn't have changed what happened, she interrupted, her voice firm despite the whisper. Don't carry that. They held each other's gaze for a moment. Then Kirishima nodded slowly, swallowing hard. So, I wish I'd been by your side. Midoriya gave him a small smile, tired but warm. You are now. Silence settled over the room. Heavy. Stifling. Then Kirishima looked up, eyes burning. I can't just sit around. I can't. They took Bakugo. And the pros, they're planning and talking and being all careful, but we don't have time. What if they move him? What if something happens before they act? Kirishima, Midoriya said, alarm rising. I'm going to save him, he said firmly. I don't care if I'm just a student. He's our friend. We've trained for this. We can do this. Kirishima, be rational, Ida interjected, stepping forward, his expression taut. We are not in the position to take such reckless action. Our duty now is to recover and support the professionals. If we act on our own, we could ruin their operation, or get ourselves killed. Kirishima stood abruptly, fists clenched at his sides. So we just do nothing. No, Ida said, voice rising. We do what we're supposed to do. We trust our teachers. We trust the pros. Charging in blind is exactly the kind of thinking that will get us all hurt. Before anyone could respond, the door swung open again. A woman in a white coat stepped in, clipboard in hand. Apologies for the interruption, the doctor said briskly. Miss Midoriya, it's time for your medical exam. We'll need the room. Midoriya glanced between her friends, torn by their words, their fear, their determination. Give us a minute, Todoroki said quietly, addressing the doctor. She nodded and stepped out. Kirishima's jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid. Ida looked just as tense. And Midoriya, aching in more ways than one, had never felt more helpless. I need to know, she said hoarsely. If you're going to do something, tell me. Promise me. Only if you promise you'll be okay, Kirishima said, eyes softening. We can't lose you too. She didn't answer. She just nodded. Kirishima lingered by the door as the others began to shuffle out, Ida stiff with disapproval, Uraraka glancing back worriedly, and Todoroki silent as ever. Midoriya watched Kirishima, saw the hesitation in his eyes, the weight of what he was about to say. He stepped closer to her bed, voice low. Hey, before I go. She looked up at him. I'm serious about what I said. He didn't fumble or second-guess himself, just met her eyes with steady conviction. I'm going after Bakugo. I can't wait around, Midoriya. I just can't. Midoriya's breath caught. Tonight, he said. After visiting hours outside the hospital. I'll be waiting. If you're in, meet me there. Kirishima, you don't have to decide now. He glanced toward the hallway where Ida's silhouette waited just out of sight. But I know you, Midoriya. You're not going to sit still either. But Kirishima wasn't done. He leaned in, gently brushing her bangs aside. Then, soft and warm, he pressed a kiss to her forehead. She froze. He pulled back just slightly, his voice softer now. Before you decide anything, make sure you're okay too, yeah. He offered her a half smile, tired but unshaken. You fought like hell for him. Let's finish what you started. Then he turned and left, boots echoing softly against the tile. The door clicked shut behind him. The doctor cleared her throat gently. "Ready, Midoriya?" She nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere, heart thudding, torn between duty and instinct, pain and loyalty. Because if there was one thing stronger than her fear, it was the promise she'd made to never leave anyone behind. The exam was long. Probes, lights, reflex tests, murmurs between doctors just out of earshot. Midoriya endured it all with quiet patience, barely flinching at the sharp pinpricks of sensation, the cold instruments against bruised skin. By late afternoon, they told her what she already knew. "You're lucky," the lead physician said. "Severe strain, fractures, some nerve inflammation, but nothing permanent. We'll be discharging you with mobility restrictions. No combat. No quirk usage." Midoriya nodded, but still not registering what the doctor said. As she sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her shirt carefully back over the wrappings, a quiet knock came at the door. Kota peeked in, hat pulled low, hands behind his back. He stepped inside hesitantly, eyes on the floor. Midoriya blinked. "Kota." He walked over without a word and held out a small folded piece of paper. It was creased and a little wrinkled, like he'd clutched it too tightly. She took it gently. "What's this?" Kota mumbled. "Just read it when you're alone, okay?" Then, before she could say anything else, he turned and scurried out of the room. Heart catching a little, Midoriya unfolded the paper. The handwriting was crooked but careful. "Thank you for saving me. Sorry I was mean before. You're not like the others. You're really strong. I want to be like that someday." Kota Midoriya's throat tightened. She read it twice, then pressed the note gently to her chest as the sun began its descent outside the window, casting long golden streaks across the hospital floor. She sat on the edge of the bed in fresh clothes, her hospital gown replaced by a hoodie and loose pants Todoroki had quietly left behind. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and hit the first number on her list. It rang twice. "Izuku," her mother's voice burst through the speaker, breathless. "Oh my God, I've been trying to get through the news, are you?" "I'm okay, Mom," Midoriya said quickly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm really sore, but I'm okay. I'm being discharged now." There was silence on the other end, and then the quiet sound of her mother trying not to cry. "I was so scared," Inko whispered. "I saw what happened on TV and they wouldn't tell us anything." "I know. I'm sorry." Midoriya's voice cracked. I didn't want you to worry even more. I promise I'll come home soon. Just, not tonight, okay?" "Izuku," her mother began, but Midoriya gently cut her off. "There's something I need to do." Pause. Then quietly, "Just, please be careful." "I will. I love you." "I love you too, sweetie. So much." The call ended. Midoriya sat for a moment, clutching the phone in her lap, heart thudding like a slow drumbeat. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the messaging app. A fresh wave of guilt churned low in her stomach. She hadn't meant to leave without saying anything, not to him. She opened Todoroki's contact and typed slowly, "I'm heading out to meet Kirishima. He needed to talk. I'll be okay. Promise." For a second, her finger hovered over the send button. Then she hit it and closed the phone before she could second-guess herself. She knew he'd worry, he always did now, even if he didn't say it out loud. But she had to go. Then she stood, wincing slightly as she adjusted the strap of the sling on her left arm. The ache in her ribs flared with each step, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Evening had fallen by the time she slipped out the side doors of the hospital, the city bathed in warm amber light and long shadows. She walked around back, the alley behind the hospital quiet except for the low hum of street lamps and distant traffic. Kirishima was already there, leaning against the wall, hoodie pulled up and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked up as she approached, straightening. "You came." Midoriya nodded, wind tugging lightly at her hair. "I had to." Kirishima's eyes lit up when he saw her, relief breaking through the tight line of worry etched on his face. "You're sure you're up for this?" Midoriya gave a short nod. "Not 100%, but I couldn't just stay in bed knowing he's out there." Before either of them could say more, a calm voice cut through the evening air. "You shouldn't go alone." They turned to see Yaoyorozu stepping out from behind a nearby pillar, her silhouette elegant and composed in the lamplight. She had traded her uniform for a sleek, dark jacket and slacks, clearly prepared for movement. "Momo." Kirishima blinked. You're coming too." "I've been researching every potential location they might be using based on the enemy's last movements," she said, holding up a tablet. "And I thought, if anyone was going to do something reckless, it would be you too. Midoriya flushed slightly, but Yaoyorozu offered a small smile, the kind that held both fondness and quiet worry. I came to help, she said simply. And then, from behind them came the unmistakable sound of polished shoes on pavement, fast, deliberate steps. You won't be going without supervision. Ida came into view, arms crossed tightly over his chest. His glasses glinted in the orange light of the street lamp, but his expression wasn't angry, it was resigned. Bakugo is our classmate. And though I still believe this is extremely ill-advised, I know now that trying to stop you by force would only split us further. He glanced at Midoriya. So I'm coming too. To make sure you don't do anything too reckless. Kirishima looked stunned. Wait, you're okay with this? No, Ida said flatly. But if you're going to jump off a cliff, someone responsible should be there to catch you. Midoriya couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. Thank you. The group stood in silence for a moment, for shadows against the dim hospital wall, unofficial, unsanctioned, but united. Kirishima exhaled slowly. Then it settled. We move tonight. Yaoyorozu tapped her tablet. I have 3 likely locations based on police intel leaks and their last known exit trajectory. Midoriya adjusted the strap of her sling, eyes narrowing with focus. A new voice broke the quiet. You'll need someone who can freeze a building from the outside in. They all turned. Todoroki stood at the edge of the alley, half in shadow, hands in his pockets. His expression was unreadable, but his presence hit like a silent storm, calm, certain, and absolutely immovable. Midoriya's breath caught. Todoroki, you didn't think you'd go without me, did you? His eyes flicked to her injured arm, then to Ida, then back. You're all injured. You need backup. And I'm not letting you do this alone. Kirishima blinked, stunned but relieved. How did you? I saw her leaving, Todoroki said simply, nodding toward Midoriya. And I followed. Midoriya opened her mouth to respond but stopped. Instead, she gave a small, grateful nod, unspoken understanding passing between them in the space of a heartbeat. Ida sighed deeply, pushing up his glasses. I suppose we're really doing this then? Todoroki stepped into the circle of streetlight, the 5th shadow joining the others beneath the pale glow. No more words were needed. They moved as one. The city lights cast a restless glow over the streets as the group moved through the crowds, their mission heavy on their shoulders. After slipping off the last train, they paused in a quiet corner near a convenience store, tucked between vending machines and the soft buzz of neon signs. Yaoyorozu checked the time. We have about 30 minutes before we head toward the first location. Let's stay sharp, Ida said. We still have time to revise the approach if necessary. Hold on, Midoriya murmured, her eyes catching on the small television screen mounted above the store entrance. The others turned as the screen flickered to a live press conference. The camera focused on a podium with a banner behind it. Standing there, tired, composed, was Principal Nizu flanked by Eraserhead and Vlad King. The city had been demanding answers and now they were getting them. We can now confirm that during the recent training incident, a small group of villains successfully infiltrated the perimeter, Nizu was saying, voice calm but firm. One of our students, Katsuki Bakugo, was taken in the chaos. Vlad King stepped forward, his face grave. We want to make it absolutely clear, the students fought valiantly and protected their classmates to the best of their ability. The situation escalated beyond anything we expected. The fault lies with us, not with the students. Eraserhead took the mic next, his voice low and cutting through the silence. A rescue operation is underway by the heroes. The students are not to pursue this on their own. Any further action taken without authorization will endanger more lives. The camera zoomed slightly on his face, dark circles beneath his eyes, jaw tight with restrained fury. Kirishima lowered his head, jaw clenched. They're trying to protect us, Midoriya murmured, her fingers curled into her sleeves. They're doing what they have to, Yaoyorozu said quietly. And so are we. Ida looked between them all. Let's be clear. We are not fighting. If we engage, we fail. If we're caught, we compromise Bakugo's safety and our own. Kirishima nodded, slowly this time. I know. I need to see him safe. That's all. Then let's do this smart, Midoriya said, pulling up her hood. We move silent. We don't draw attention. We get in and out. They resumed their walk through the city until the bright chaos of Don Quixote loomed ahead of them like a glowing beacon of excess. Disguises? Yaoyorozu said, already striding toward the doors. At checkout, Kirishima looked around at the group. We look like 5 weirdos sneaking out of a manga. I prefer the term urban shadows, Yaoyorozu replied dryly. Todoroki adjusted the brim of his hat and looked down at the all-black hoodie, oversized sunglasses and patterned scarf Midoriya had tossed him earlier. I look like someone trying very hard not to be recognized. You're doing great, Midoriya said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Midoriya's heart beat faster as she looked at the people around her. Not soldiers. Not licensed heroes. Just friends. Risking everything for one of their own. No fights. No mistakes, she whispered. Just a rescue, Kirishima said, tightening his grip on the strap of his duffel. Let's bring him home, Ida finished, adjusting his glasses. And with that, they disappeared into the city's undercurrent. The city felt different at night, sharper, heavier. Every light cast a deeper shadow, and every footstep echoed just a little louder. Midoriya walked with the others in silence, the sounds of the world muffled by the hood of her sweater and the mask covering her face. Her thoughts buzzed louder than the neon signs above. Kekken. Trap. Alone. They had to get to him before it was too late. Their disguises did the job. No one looked twice at them. Just 4 figures moving through the crowd, heads down, quiet. Yaoyorozu led the way with her tablet clutched in one hand, the GPS marked with the first potential location. An abandoned industrial building just a few blocks ahead. As they turned off the main road, the space tightened around them. They passed through a rusted gate and slipped into a narrow service alley, so narrow the brick walls on either side nearly brushed their shoulders. Midoriya followed behind Ida, the sharp scent of damp concrete filling her nose. The alley got tighter with every step, forcing them to go single file. She shifted sideways, trying to wedge through without bumping into the walls. And failed. Her chest pressed awkwardly against the cold brick. She let out a strained grunt, stumbling slightly. Kirishima, just ahead, glanced back. You okay? Ugh, yeah, Midoriya muttered, face burning behind her mask. It's just, this body is way harder to move around in. My bub and my, she winced as her backside caught on a pipe, but are making it seriously difficult to squeeze through. Kirishima snorted, trying and failing to hold back a laugh. You said it, not me. Shut up, she grumbled, twisting sideways with a grunt and finally breaking free of the tightest part. God, how do girls do this? Yaoyorozu, now waiting at the end of the alley with Ida, raised an eyebrow. Some of us were born with spatial awareness, Midoriya? Midoriya groaned. Remind me to add this to my combat training notes, unexpected body-related stealth complications. You're adapting quickly, Ida offered in his usual serious tone, though the edge of his mouth twitched slightly with amusement. Adapting isn't the same as thriving, she muttered, dusting herself off as they regrouped. Still, despite the awkwardness, the pinch of pain in her ribs, and the heat crawling up her neck, she was glad to be here. Moving. Trying. Fighting in her own way. She glanced at the dark building ahead, the first possible hideout. Focus. The joking stopped. The mission began. The building loomed ahead like a dead thing, squat and silent at the end of the alley. Its windows were boarded over, its gates rusted shut. Midoriya stared at it from the shadows of a crumbling fence, her breath misting in the cool air. They crouched behind a low stack of crates, the silence between them taut with tension. This is the first spot, Yaoyorozu whispered, checking her tablet. Everything lines up. Old records show it was owned by a shell company connected to known villain activity. No registered occupants for years. Too quiet, Kirishima muttered. Makes my skin itch. We'll need confirmation before we act, Ida said, adjusting his mask. And we can't risk getting close. Night vision would help, but I can make some, Yaoyorozu said quickly, already reaching toward her jacket to begin the creation process. But before she could materialize anything, Kirishima held up a hand. No need. I brought these. From his duffel, he pulled out a compact pair of military-style night vision binoculars. They looked slightly scuffed but functional. Midoriya blinked. Seriously? You brought those? Wasn't gonna storm a villain base without at least some cool gear, Kirishima said with a half-smile as he raised them to his eyes. He went still immediately. Asishti. Everyone tensed. What is it? Yaoyorozu asked sharply. Kirishima didn't answer at first, eyes locked on whatever he was seeing. Then, slowly, he lowered the binoculars and handed them to Midoriya. You need to see this. She took them carefully, her hands suddenly cold despite the hoodie. She lifted them to her eyes, adjusted the focus, and sucked in a breath. There, in the dark loading dock behind the building, 2 hulking figures stood perfectly still, like statues made of muscle and death. Their bodies pulsed faintly, skin stitched and stretched. Even without the greenish tint of the night vision, she would have recognized them. "Nomus," she whispered. The word made the others go still. "Which means," Kirishima said grimly, "we found something real." Midoriya lowered the binoculars. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Kaken was in there. And so were the villains. The world had gone sideways in the blur of smoke, fists, and teleportation. Bakugo didn't remember hitting the ground, just the cold, slick feeling of something warping around him, dragging him through space like he was nothing more than a sack of meat. He lashed out in the dark, but his quirk flared uselessly against the warping void. The moment his boots found solid ground again, he was surrounded. Dobby. Spinner. That DMN lizard. And him, the warped, childish face of Tamura Shigaraki smirking like he'd already won. Chains wrapped around Bakugo's arms before he could lift them. A punch to the gut kept him still. "Welcome," Shigaraki had purred, voice like nails on rusted steel. "Let's talk about the future, Katsuki Bakugo." He didn't give them anything. Not a word. Not a wince. Not a flinch. Instead he sat, shackled to a pillar in a hollowed-out warehouse, every sense on fire with rage and adrenaline. His wrists were raw, lips split from biting down every scream. They didn't feed him much. Didn't let him sleep long. Kept the lights low and the pressure high. And yet he burned with fury. Not fear. Because he knew they wanted him. Not just to break him, but to turn him. Use him. They didn't get it. Bakugo Katsuki wasn't breakable. What he didn't expect was the sudden flicker of a news report from a grimy radio in the far corner of the room. Midoriya. Injured. Hospitalized. He didn't hear the full broadcast, just enough. Just her name. Just the word critical. And something inside him turned to ice. "Deku, you demon idiot," he growled, voice low and hoarse. He had told her. Screamed it in the moment they grabbed him, when black mist coiled around his feet and gravity tore at his ribs. "Don't come after me." Not just because he didn't want to be rescued, especially not by her, not by Deku, not when she'd already gotten stronger, already started to outrun him in ways he hated to admit. But because seeing her on that hospital bed, bandaged and weak because of him. No, he didn't need saving. Not from her. Not from anyone. He'd get out of here. He'd make them regret ever touching him. And when he saw her again, she'd be standing, not bleeding. Standing and safe. He'd make sure of that. But even thinking about her walking into this nest of monsters, even with that stupid determined look in her green eyes, his pride cracked under the weight of something rawer, something sharper. "Don't come for me, Deku. Because if you do, and if you get hurt again, I won't be able to live with it." Of course not that Bakugo was going all soft and mushy for Deku. He just doesn't want to be in debt to that nerd. Especially that she was all girly now. The chains rattled faintly as Bakugo shifted against the concrete pillar, the metal biting into his wrists again. His palms itched for a blast, just one. One shot and he'd level this whole DMN building. But with the suppressor cuffs still locked tight around his wrists, all he could do was glare. Footsteps echoed through the warehouse, slow, deliberate, taunting. Still not talking. Shigaraki's voice slithered through the gloom like smoke. "Man, you really are stubborn." Bakugo didn't answer. Didn't move. His crimson eyes followed the villain with a silent promise. "The second I'm free, you're ash." Shigaraki came to a lazy stop in front of him, crouching slightly, his decaying fingers twitching inches from Bakugo's face. He tilted his head, like studying a particularly violent stray dog. "You know, we've been watching you for a while now. Ever since a sports festival." Bakugo's scowl deepened. "Oh yeah," Shigaraki went on, smiling faintly. "You remember it, don't you? The way you won. The way you blasted your way to the top, no matter how much it made you look like a ticking time bomb." His eyes gleamed in the dark. Everyone was whispering, even the pros. "What's with that kid? He's too aggressive. Too unstable. Is he really hero material?" But I saw it. I saw someone who fights like he doesn't care what gets broken. Someone who doesn't play by the rules. Who's powerful enough to take what he wants and smart enough to survive the fallout. Bakugo bared his teeth. "So what? You think I'm gonna join your little freak show? That it?" Shigaraki chuckled, standing upright again. "I think you're already halfway here, Bakugo." He began pacing slowly, hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. "The way you explode at your classmates. The way you talk to Midoriya, so much hate for someone who only ever admired you. That temper, that pride. You don't belong in a world that tells you to smile and wave while saving people. You belong in ours." Bakugo's jaw clenched. The mention of Midoriya hit harder than he liked. She'd admired him once. Followed him. Chased him. Now she was out there, probably limping around half-healed, thinking she had to save him. His hands twitched against the cuffs. "I'm not like you," he said. Voice low and dangerous. "You hide behind monsters. I fight them. I don't destroy the world to feel powerful. I beat it until it bends." Shigaraki's grin twisted wider. "That anger's going to eat you alive eventually, you know. You'll either use it for yourself, or someone else will use it against you." He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "Think about it, Bakugo. You could be more than just a pawn in someone else's war. You could be king." Then he turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the dark again. Bakugo didn't look after him. He stared at the floor, breath sharp, eyes burning. He wasn't a pawn. He wasn't a king. He was Katsuki Bakugo. And if they thought they could twist him, chain him, use him, they were in for a hell of a wake-up call. Bakugo's fists strained against the cuffs, muscles flexing with rage. His breathing sharpened, measured through grit teeth and hate. "King. Pawn. They think I'm gonna kneel." He slammed his shoulder into the pillar behind him, testing the chains with a metallic clang. Pain jolted through his back. Good. It meant he was still awake, still burning. You think I'm just gonna sit here and listen to your delusional CRP?" He snarled toward the darkness. "Screw that. I'm done playing hostage." Dabi appeared first, sauntering from the shadows, bored eyes glowing with blue flame. "You sure about that, brat?" he said coolly. "Because without those fancy explosions you're just another pissed-off kid strapped to a wall." "Try me, fire trash," Bakugo spat, jerking at the cuffs again. "I'll bite your demon face off if I have to." Spinner emerged next, unsheathing one of his blades, his grip twitching with excitement. "Let me shut him up, Shigaraki. Just one cut." Bakugo leaned forward, wild grin splitting his bruised lips. "Yeah. Come on then. You think I'm scared of a lizard with a tin knife? I'll rip your tongue out with my teeth." Dabi's flames crackled. Spinner stepped forward. And then, enough. Shigaraki's voice cut the room in half. His hand hovered inches from a rusted support beam. The metal beneath his palm had already begun to flake and rot. "You kill him," Shigaraki said flatly, "and you'll answer to him." That made the room still. Spinner gritted his teeth and backed off. Dabi blew a breath through his nose and let the flame flicker out. Shigaraki tilted his head slightly at Bakugo, watching him like one might study a wild dog clawing at its leash. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about hurting you. It's about breaking what you represent. My emissary has plans for you." Bakugo was quiet for a beat. Then, slowly, dangerously, he laughed. "Plans? For me?" His hands clenched. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." And then, boom. A deafening snap of light and smoke exploded from his right palm. Sparks tore through the cuffs. One chain melted. Then the other. The suppressors had weakened. Maybe a design flaw, maybe overused, maybe Bakugo had just flexed them enough to make room. Didn't matter. The moment his wrists were free, he moved. The villains recoiled, Spinner cursing, Dabi lighting up again, but Bakugo didn't go for them. Not yet. He needed a way out. A route. A shot at Kaken-style payback would come later. For now, he dashed straight toward the far end of the room, shoulder first, throwing himself through the first weak spot in the wall he could find. Concrete cracked. Light spilled in. And Bakugo was gone in a blast of smoke and rage, the echo of his defiance ringing behind him. This marks the end of part 2 of What If Deku Became a Girl? A big thanks to aywashe for granting the permission to feature this amazing fanfiction. The link of the original fanfiction is in the description below. Please like the video and subscribe to Deku Universe for more interesting stories. Thank you and see you soon.